Well, good afternoon, everyone. So glad to have you back with us again here in Advocacy Arena's weekly live chat, where we gather to inform and inspire civic engagement each Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central Time. We're thankful that you are here with us today. We hope that you will share the space and invite others in. I think we're going to have a great conversation today. And one of the things that we're going to do is to take a little trip down memory lane because I think that it is important for us to have this perspective as we move into this election season. So I want to give my co-host an opportunity to say hello and greet you guys. And then I am going to start our little historical journey, and we'll take a little break if it gets too long and windy. Because I do want other people involved in the conversation, but I do want to lay this framework, this groundwork, so that you have a better understanding, a clearer picture of the state of affairs today, how they have been in the works for, centuries actually, and just being more aware, more informed, I think allows us to be better prepared as democracy warriors. So let's get our conversation started by opening the floor to our co-host so that she can say hello to everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here again in Advocacy Arena. I'm sorry, I've somehow mixed up my notes. Trying to get them back in order.
Okay.
Um,
If you need a moment, I can kind
I
of get
do
us
need a
started.
kind of a moment
Okay,
because
I'll just go
yep,
ahead and get us started.
thank you.
All right. So, as we look forward to and prepare for the most important election of our lifetime, it's vital for us to understand what's at stake. A look back at our past to add some context can help guide and inform our future. And we're going to go away a ways back today, guys. Interestingly enough, the month of May, especially the first couple of weeks, is actually filled with significant historical events, I think, that are worth noting and remembering because many of these events still hold relevance for us today. And I want to start by taking us back about 400 years. Actually, I want to go back 415 years ago, almost to the day. We're a few days early. But on May 14th, 1607, the Jamestown settlement was established in Virginia, and that was named after King James I. And so we're going to move along a little bit, and we'll move up a couple of centuries to 250 years ago. And on May 10th, 1773, the Tea Act was instituted by the British Parliament, and that allowed the British East India Company to sell tea directly to the American colonists, bypassing the colonial merchants. So it gave them a tax break on the tea, making it cheaper than the smuggled tea. And the East India Tea Company was struggling financially and had large amounts of tea in its warehouses that they needed to move. And the Tea Act was one of several measures imposed on the American colonists who had arrived here, a couple hundred years ago, by the British government in the decade before the American Revolution. The British government was in debt after winning the 7 Years' War and saw the American colonies as a potential source of revenue. But that Tea Act and the other taxes were so unpopular with the American colonists, and they were pretty upset about it. So later that year, December 16, 1773, the Boston Tea Party was a major act of defiance against the British Crown Tea Act, which led to the American Revolution and eventually our independence. So we're going to move up now another 100 years or so. And on May 10th, 1865, Jefferson Davis, the president of the fallen Confederate government, was captured with his wife and their entourage in Irwinville, Georgia, by Union soldiers from a detachment of the 4th Michigan Cavalry. So shout out to Michigan, soul sister. We appreciate y'all. And there was a bit of controversy surrounding his capture that played out in northern newspapers. When he was captured, he was wearing his wife's shawl. The papers had a field day, mocking and ridiculing him, calling him a coward who had dressed like a woman to escape. I'm sure that was a bit emasculating for him. But his wife, Verenia, was quick to come to his aid, and she said that she had given him the shawl to wear for health reasons because he had become ill during their journey. Are you still with me? I tell you this story because now I ask you, do you believe Verenia's version? Okay. Remember, now these are the same folks who turned their horrendous loss into a noble Southern cause, a movement that continues to this day, the Lost Cause. And I want to remind you that Jefferson Davis only served 2 years. You hear me? 2 measly years in prison for trying to overthrow the United States of America's government. Okay. So now that happened. Jefferson was captured in 1865. And a year later, the term lost cause first appeared in the title of a book by a Virginian author and journalist named Edward Pollard, titled The Lost Cause, A New Southern History of the War of the Confederates. Okay. He promoted the lost cause themes like states' rights as the cause of the war and said that Southerners were forced to defend themselves against Northern aggression. He dismissed the role of slavery in starting the war and understated the cruelty of slavery, saying it was a way of improving the lives of Africans. Now, Pollard's revisionist history continues to have an effect on how slavery and the Civil War are taught in the United States today. I'm pretty sure that most of you remember because it got a lot of news attention at the time. But a couple of years ago, when Florida was passing all of its extreme bills, like Don't Say Gay and some other things, one of the things that they also did was institute a new history curriculum that was pretty much touting these lost cause revisionist history talking points, saying that slavery had benefits. Okay, but I digress to steal that from Shantae. But so then 4 years later, after his capture, his surrender, there was a Southern Historical Society formed with the purpose of preserving the Southern perspective of secession, preserve the records of the Confederacy and the Civil War. And also a little tidbit because, you know, life is going on, life is lifing just like it is for us now with all these crazy things that, 50 years from now will definitely be in history books. And I think it's important that people know what ordinary people were doing and how they were responding. But also during this time, in on May 9th, 1869, so 4 years after he was captured, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. So, major step forward in transportation in the United States. Now, they say history is written by the victors, but you see, the story I just told you, the Civil War is the rare exception. I don't know, maybe it's because the need for the country to stay together, made it necessary for the North to sit quietly and accept the South's version of the conflict. Have we not heard this recently? So the country can heal. You know, people do these awful things and then everyone just wants to move on. No accountability. But in any case, for most of the past 150 years, the South's version of the war and Reconstruction has held sway in our schools, in our literature, and since the dawn of feature films, our movies. Now, after the Civil War, white Southerners wanted to portray the South positively by erecting Confederate monuments to memorialize Confederate generals in support of this false narrative that Confederates had fought the war to preserve states' rights and not slavery. But African Americans during that time, civil rights activists of the 19th century, like Frederick Douglass, opposed the erection of these Confederate monuments. About in 1870, he wrote an essay. And so now this is 5 years after Davis has surrendered. This is Frederick Douglass. Monuments to the lost cause will prove monuments of folly. In the memories of a wicked rebellion, which they must necessarily perpetuate. It is a needless record of stupidity and wrong. And you know that we're still living with some of those monuments today. And not just in statutes, but names and plaques and all of these other things that go along with
School
their.
names.
Exactly. And there's a recent history where they slapped some Confederate generals' names back on schools that they had taken off. So we're moving along. I don't have too much more but I'm going to move along quickly. But I just want to kind of lay this track for you. 6 years after Davis was captured, Frederick Douglass was speaking during a national celebration of Memorial Day at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. And he delivered a speech about slavery as the meaning and the cause of the Civil War. He said, "We are sometimes asked in the name of patriotism to forget the merits of this fearful struggle and to remember with equal admiration those who struck at the nation's life and those who struck to save it, those who fought for slavery and those who fought for liberty and justice. And I am no minister of malice. I would not repel the repentant, but maybe my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I forget the difference between the parties to that bloody conflict." So I'm with Douglas on that. We cannot forget. We can never forget, no matter how they try to revise history. So another little invention that came along and affected the White House 12 years later, May 10th, 1877, President Rutherford B. Hayes installed the first telephone in the White House. So now we got transportation and we got communication. And now, 16 years later, Jefferson Davis finishes his 2-volume memoir entitled The Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government. And this was published in 1881. And so these efforts to promote the lost cause are still going on in a myriad of ways. Another African American, prominent African American, John Mitchell Jr., he was a newspaper editor, a politician, a banker, and a civil rights activist in the 19th and early 20th century from Richmond, Virginia. He advocated against the erection of the Robert E. Lee Monument there. He tried to block its funding, but was stopped by a white conservative majority. In Richmond, on May 29th, 1890, so 25 years now after his capture, it was unveiled during a celebration And he covered the event in the Richmond Planet, the newspaper he wrote for. And he wrote, "This glorification of states' rights doctrine, the right of secession, and the honoring of men who represented that cause, fosters in the Republic the spirit of rebellion and will ultimately result in the handing down to generations unborn a legacy of treason and blood." And here we are today. White Christian nationalism still alive and well and thriving, having a resurgence. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of pause right there because you see where I'm going with this. This is not new, and this is the danger that we are facing today. The same dangers that we faced that led our country to a civil war. So, with that, I'm going to give you a little break from this history lesson. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope that some of you will come up and join in on it. There are some other things that we're going to be covering, but I think that it was very important for us to cover those aspects as we cover the current day ones, because history doesn't always repeat directly, but in a very indirect way, it rhymes. They kind of cross along the same general lines. And I think that it's important for us to remember that and to remind others of that, because that is what is at stake. That is what we're dealing with right now. So, with that, I am going to give my co host, who I hope has her papers in order now, and we'll take a
Yes,
little.
ma'am. I had numbered them wrong. I
No
was like, wait a
problem.
minute.
I'm glad I could get all of that out and take a little breather and get some things up in the jumbotron. I think maybe if people have seen my timeline today, they've seen the agenda, hopefully, and they can see the kind of things that we want to make sure that people are aware of, and how much we talk about them um, will vary or depend. But I do think that there are very, very important aspects of things going on that uh, mainstream media certainly is probably not covering, because they're all sitting in New York, watching Trump. But I yield here and give you the mic, my dear.
Thank you, Misty. And that's really important. I was reading an article earlier, and I'm trying to find it. I will post it up there, and it basically supports everything you were just talking about. And it goes back in the history, and then kind of makes this comparison to what's happening right now and why that is significant. And when I find it, I will put it up in the nest. I thought I had it bookmarked, but I don't think I did. Anyway, I do want to get to some news in regards to the UAW. As many people know, I've been talking about it for weeks, and congratulations again to the VW workers who just recently voted to join the UAW. This week is the Mercedes-Benz workers vote to join the UAW. It starts today, and they have until Friday morning to cast their vote. It covers about 5,000 workers, and hopefully they will see some victory. And now, in 2016, just in 2006, I just really want to point out how significantly close, recent rather, this was. But it was just in 2016 when Alabama um, added to its state constitution a national right to work law, and obviously it has not been repealed as much, since then. And also in 2020, it's just it's crazy. The more I read about what's happened in the state of Alabama or any of the southern states, it baffles my mind. In 2020, they being Mercedes-Benz, introduced a two-tier wage system. Like I just don't understand why in 2020. It just it's odd to me that they couldn't see the writing on the wall, that this was probably not the direction they should be going in. And obviously, it has come back to bite them in the behind, because after the Detroit 3 contract wins, it gave workers hope and courage to believe in themselves and their ability to form a union and bargain collectively. And they began signing union cards about a week after the Detroit Three ratified their contract. So, of course, then the company decided to take notice. And 3 months later, as the UAW campaign began to pick up some steam, they announced that they were going to give workers pay raises, and then they would end two-tier wages, which they never should have began in the first place. Also, 2 weeks ago, a new CEO was announced at Mercedes-Benz, and their biggest campaign push right now, they being the company, is asking the workers to give the new leadership a chance, because they don't need a union. And so for months they've been using these safety meetings, or company update meetings, where workers usually come in and watch these videos and receive some type of training or education information that they might be relevant to their workday. Well, they've been using those as captive audience meetings, and they've been playing videos.
Oh, we talked about that in the
Yeah,
interview that we did, and this is
yeah,
them basically trying to propagandize
absolutely.
the employees.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they've been pointing out, obviously, what they see as bad unions, and they point to examples within the state, like Amazon workers who are still struggling, still fighting at least to achieve union representation at Amazon, and then the coal miners in the state. To me, it seems odd that they would choose the coal miners, which is an industry that is, I feel, vastly different than automotive manufacturing. But what they point to is the fact that these workers went out on strike in 2021. They went out because they in 2015 they had taken some pay cut, and they were told that it was going to be very temporary, and it was just to help the company get back on their feet. And then the company was sold to some Wall Street investors. These investors came in, turned the company around, and started seeing profits, but the workers never saw any increase in pay. So in 2021, the the coal miners union, they went out on strike, stayed out for 2 years. Ultimately, they ended up going back, and they did not receive anything. They still don't have better protections. They still don't have a higher rate of pay. But the strike kind of fell apart, and that's part of the story that they're not saying, where some of the union workers actually crossed the picket line. The company brought in scabs to replace many of the workers, and only a couple hundred ended up returning to the job. Others ended up, finding work elsewhere. And so it's a mishmash of a story, and it's not the same. But they're trying to make this comparison, like, look at what happens. It just, your whole life is going to fall apart, and that's the message that they're sending. But not only that, many workers are also being pulled into meetings with the company's lawyers, and basically the company's lawyers are saying vote no, and they're kind of held. This is usually before their shift starts, and they're kind of held in there for up to an hour, even being told to vote no against joining the union. So there are some very strong arm tactics that are happening right now. And I do know that the UAW has filed some NLRB charges, not just there, but also at Hyundai as well. So they do quite a bit in order to keep the union out. And that's just one thing that they another thing that they have that they did in Alabama, their first I guess, entry into their relationship with Mercedes Benz was to bid for a training center to be built there. And so what they did was not just offer cash incentives; they also offered to pay the employees' salaries while they studied at this training center. And this is all, they made a promise to buy 2,500 vehicles for the state. They offered to display the Mercedes-Benz emblem at, a game, an Alabama Tennessee football game, free of charge, and it worked. And so they ended up getting this training center there. And it's just remarkable that they will spend millions just to keep the workers from receiving better pay, better job protection, and better health care, even though they claim to be working. And these are, government officials. They claim to be, representing the people, which are the workers in that state. And I think that's kind of significant because some of the articles that I read spoke about people who, these are not just Democrat who work in the plants that are, fighting to join a union. These are Republicans as well. It's young, it's old, it's men, it's women, it's multiracial diversity. It is there's no uniformity in the fact that, like, oh, this is what a person looks like when they want to join a union, which I think is very significant and shows the appeal of what union protections and privileges provide to its membership. And I think that that's really important, and that's making a heck of a difference in these campaigns that are currently occurring. But one of the things that stood out is that the workers felt betrayed in several different states, not just in Alabama, but also in Tennessee, also in sorry, my dogs. Also in South Carolina, where they're saying, I can't believe that I voted for this person and this person is working against me and for big business, and that's not what I thought, I voted for. And so I think that's going to make a difference come when it comes time for reelection for many of these people. I think it should also be noted that in 2002, they had manufacturing workers in Michigan were making 42% more than manufacturing workers in states like South Carolina. And the companies kind of took note of that. And in order to keep the unions out, they began closing that wage gap. And so now it's been cut significantly to about 3%. However, their healthcare costs, premiums, and their work-life balance are just deplorable. And so it hasn't been enough to stop workers from wanting to form a union in their workplace. They want better health insurance. They want better safety protocols. I'm sorry, and they want a more significant work-life balance. So cost of living has also played a role in what's motivating workers, but the biggest factor has been what they saw the UAW accomplish with the Detroit 3 contracts this year, basically achieving the impossible. Everybody said that there would be no way that the UAW and Sean Fain would be able to get rid of two-tier, and he was definitely able to do that. And there was no way they would get significant uh, bonuses and pay raises throughout the contract, and they did that. That has really motivated these workers to get behind the UAW. So I wish them luck. I wish them well. And, it's not going to stop there, not going to stop just with Alabama. And, heaven forbid if this drive does not succeed, which I don't see it failing. And I'm not saying that the UAW is too big to fail, because obviously that is not the case for anything in this country. But I do believe that right now there is a momentum, and workers are definitely finding that there is more of a benefit to joining a union versus trying to play friendly with a company that fluctuates in their promises and goes back and forth. And people want a sense of certainty, especially in today's times. And so I think that that's going to be a major win for them. So that is the most up to date that I have at this moment in regards to the UAW. And I'll turn it back over to you guys.
All right. Well, thank you so much for those union updates. And we're going to get to a couple of the hands, and then I'll pick back up with our history journey. So first, we'll go to Ingrid and then Joseph.
Good afternoon, ladies. So great being in this space today. Again, always. I must say, Dee, you doing that history lesson brought me back to Miss Jackson. So it was kind of great, kind of listening to the stuff again and saying, "Oh yeah, I remember that, and I remember that." And you're right, you just brought it full circle to what we're dealing with today. And yes, it does feel like a civil war again if you really look back and you look at things, how things have been just not going in the direction that we obviously wanted to go. But what I love that we are having these spaces and educating and empowering people out here to really know our history, because history is repeats, and we're supposed to learn from our mistakes so we don't repeat them again. And here we are. And that's when I listen to you today, it brings back to me the 14.3 and why that came about and why it was important. And it saddens me when I see that it's being given such little regard. It's in the Constitution. It's written in clear language, and I know that we're going to get there. We're going to get there, but the Constitution, I like to say, yes, it's flawed in many ways, but it has advanced. It's only 27 amendments, and a lot of them were written as it evolved. It was written to make things better for us, not take us back. And I love these history lessons to let us know we can go back because it's very ugly. And I love, so sister, when you speak about the union. My parents worked for the city. They had the union. I'm 66. I could tell you it is a wonderful thing. Of course, you have bad apples everywhere, but unions made the middle class, the United States. The health care, I mean, my parents were able to retire well by being part of it. And yes, it has its drawbacks, but depending where, right? I guess if you're in Alabama or Arkansas that want to get rid of unions, they're going to have pressure on that end. So we have to still keep going and share what we know and spread the words far and wide. And eventually, we all will get there together. But again, thanks again for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to say, Dee, continue the history lessons. We're loving it. So, sister, continue with the union because we need other voices. We need stronger voices because they're the oligarchs, the top businesses. Look at Chevron wants to merge with, I can't remember what oil company now. We can't do this. We cannot allow these monopolies, and corporations are not people too. We the people are the ones that hold the Constitution, not them. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ingrid, and I appreciate that. And I do think that it really is important if we want to be well informed, engaged citizens, that it is necessary that we understand our history and that we learn from our history. Because the saying goes, if you don't learn from it, you're doomed to repeat it. And some people, I think, are trying to make us repeat it on purpose. So, because it was good for them then. But we're not going back. So, thank you again so much for coming up and sharing in the conversation today. And now I have two other lovely people I'll hear from before I pick back up 29 years from the capture of Davis. And that marks a very significant point. And I think you can all relate to it. I've talked about it before, but I want to hear from some of you. So we're going to go to Joseph and then Davina.
Hello, Ms. D. Hello, Soul Sister. So nice to be back in advocacy arena again, starting off the week on the right foot. I want to talk really quickly about a couple of things that are very hot in the news this morning, and then Ms. D, I kind of want to add to one of your points about history, given that I am such a history geek. So, real quick, I'm sure it's blowing up the timeline this morning about what I considered a rather bogus New York Times poll saying that the former guy is beating President Biden in Nevada by double. I don't believe that for a moment. Because you know why? Because one, the New York Times has had it out for President Biden since the day he took off, and they have put numerous hit pieces out on him. Secondly, a poll, when somebody's conducting a poll, you can manipulate your sample. So I wanted who they were polling. If they just did a sample of mostly Republicans, or if they polled Nevada's rural counties, that I could see. But I have a hard time that people in Clark and Washoe County are going to vote for the former guy, especially when Nevada is going to have on the ballot in November voting to protect abortion rights. And also the fact that it's while the state legislature is not in session, they only meet every other year. In this last session, they had Democratic majorities in both the Assembly and Senate. And not only that, they had a super majority in the state assembly. So Nevada is perfect. It is, while it is going to be very much in play for the presidential race and for their Senate race, I'm not believing this stuff for the media is trying to manipulate things. They want a horse. And I think they're very detached from the reality of it. I refuse to believe that, especially that a majority of women would vote for somebody who wants to ban abortion nationwide. And it's not going to stop with abortion. They're going for birth control. They're going for other forms of contraceptive. So I refuse to believe that there are that many countries who are so stupid and ill-informed. So I think we've just got to ignore the noise. I'm going to be back in Nevada. I'm going to enjoy the week of 4th of July in the Lake Tahoe and Reno region. That will be after Nevada's primary. So hopefully I'll get a better feel of what the political climate is. Of course, Northern Nevada, especially in some of the rural areas, of course, is more Republican, but still, I'm sure by that point, Jackie Rosen will probably be putting out ads on TV, and probably there will be billboards around in Reno. So hopefully by then I'll have a better idea. Also, next Tuesday, I'm going back to Arizona. I have a very quick work trip to Tucson. I don't know if I'll be able to gauge the political climate in around Tucson. I will say that I will be working in Arizona's 6th congressional district, which is one of the districts that we need to flip in November, and it is a district where we have a very good chance of flipping. So if you're not already following Kristen Engel, who looks like she's going to be the Democratic nominee, I don't think there's any other Democrats in that race. Please give her a follow. Juan Ciscomani needs to be voted out. He's a Trump surrogate. He's anti-abortion right. He needs to be voted out. So next week when I get to Tucson, I will try to post as much as I can about that. So on the historical perspective, I know you mentioned President Rutherford Hayes, and of course he was president when the dreaded Compromise of 1877 happened. And I keep talking about this a lot. And this is actually one lesson from my high school American history class that really has stuck with me for close to 30 years at this point. But me, that's an event that really set off the chain reaction of why we see the things that we see today, because it led to Jim Crow in the South, because it ended Reconstruction. It was basically because it was a deal to give President Hayes enough electoral votes to win the presidency, but in exchange for that, he had to end Reconstruction, which President Hayes, before the Civil War, President Hayes was a staunch abolitionist, and he represented many freed or former slaves in court in, I believe, it's Ohio, where he was from. So he was, very, very much against slavery. So I'm sure he did not enjoy having to end the Reconstruction, but that was the only way, basically, that he would be able to be president. But when you think about it, it just set in motion so much of what we still see today. And another thing that I've talked about is the constant romanticization of the Confederacy. And, we've seen it in movies, we've seen it in books, we've seen it in TV. And it's like, in Germany, you don't see this romanticization of the Nazi era. You don't see the romanticization of the former East Germany of 40 years of communism. Why do we in this country romanticize people who were traitors, who tried to break this country apart? And not only that, why are we romanticizing race? It makes zero sense. These are people who enslaved other beings. There is no justification in my book for romanticizing people. None whatsoever. But like you said, these are people who want to take us back purposely. They purposely want to repeat history's mistakes, and we can't let them. That's why November we have to come out in force, because I think everybody who is in this room right now stands to lose a lot if things don't go our way in November. So with that, Ms. D, I will land my plane. Thank you to you and Soul Sister for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I will sit back and listen to everybody else.
Well, Davina, before you go, I want to say a couple of things in connection to several of the things that Joseph touched on, because I will be going into. It's funny that you talked about the romanticizing of it, and they actually, in this upcoming history, part of that narrative and reframing that they did in some of the most influential books that were written at that time literally had the word romance in it. One literal, the leopard's spots, a romance of the white man's burden, the Klansman, a historical romance of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, so they absolutely did romanticize some of the most horrific moments and periods in our history. So it is not new. They're still doing it today. They are calling insurrectionists hostages. So nothing has changed with these people. And that's why, again, it just struck me when I was looking at the history channel page, because I'm just a history nerd, so I'm always going. And on Friday, the what was it, the 10th, whatever day that was, yeah, I think it was Friday, and I saw that Jefferson Davis had been captured, and it just, all these things that are going on right now today just cascaded through my mind, and I'm like, nothing has changed. I mean, many things have, but many things have not. And there is a strong desire, a wave to really literally drag us back there, because for them, those were the good old days. you know? It's crazy. But I'm going to go next to Davina, and then I will take just another little dive into the remaining bit of history that I kind of think is important to bring us up to today. And oh, I know the other thing that you spoke about, Joseph, that is on my list, and I just posted it on my timeline. I'll try to make sure I get it in the nest or the thread, but it is an article from the executive editor of the New York Times, and it's really quite amazing and disgusting how he thinks of his job and his newspaper's job. He was interviewed by um, Semaphores, Ben Smith, and the reporter, I think, commented that, like, democracy is on the line here, basically, or something to that effect. And he pretty much told him that, yeah, he knew it, but that wasn't his job. Like, yeah, at the moment, democracy is a top issue, but it's not the top one. Immigration happens to be the top of the polls, and the economy and inflation is second. So that just goes along with the bogus poll that you were speaking about, Joseph. And this is them today trying to shape and change a narrative. So this is where we must be savvy and understand the context, to appreciate the context and also just the falseness, to recognize it for what it is, propaganda. And then even when something is not necessarily propaganda, really kind of dissecting it and trying to understand what a recurring call to action or inaction for me is for people to like remain calm. You know how that was kind of like a saying that was put on everything for a while, just be calm. But we really do. There is a sense of urgency, but we don't have to act from an emotional standpoint in this urgency. And I think that it's best and we are smarter when we don't, because something else I've been talking about is the fact that in their effort to not only changing the narrative, they also are intentionally stoking culture wars because they've had a long history of doing this, knowing where the sore spots are, so to speak. And a lot of those spots are sore because we have never dealt with them because they keep trying to rewrite the history and to change it. And we're just going to keep going in this crazy, crazy circle until we deal with the facts and truth. This is, I think, one of the things that has helped Germany to thrive and prosper as a country, as a nation, after all the hell that took place on their soil. But I'm going to stick a pin in that and give our fabulous next speaker, Davina, an opportunity to chime in because I know she's going to take us to lofty places around democracy. And some of this stuff is so just evil that it can kind of put you in a dark place. And I'm not telling it to depress us, but just to inform us and to really still instill a sense of hope within us. So, Davina, I'm going to give the floor to you, my dear.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you for all the history lessons and that warning too that confronting sometimes the depth of darkness in the human soul and human action can be depressing. And I always try and remind myself that sometimes depression is a function of your own expectation. So when you steel your soul to accept that there is a lot of darkness in in the human character, and in particular sometimes in groups of people who just get carried away with behaving terribly, you have to embrace the good things as well, purposefully and willfully, in order to bolster your soul, because you need to be able to look at beauty and goodness in order to thrive and function in this world.
And that's why I post my florals in my nature pictures.
Yeah. So for me to pull out today and look at democracy, I go in 2016, if I'm to generalize one of the problems, I would say complacency and cynicism led to people taking Hillary Clinton's victory for granted and failing to vote for her, or taking the American democracy for granted and failing to vote for the actual pro-democracy candidate, and falsely both sidesing Trump and Hillary Clinton into equally villainous figures, which was false, very, very false. So I think the fact that we've endured one Trump presidency means complacency and cynicism aren't necessarily the biggest problems now. We have what was a problem before, which is what happens to white people when they feel like their pride in a false narrative of white heroic mythology is getting ripped from them. And then they will do a lot to try and protect it or rebuild it. And I always think you can learn so much about people's motivations when you look at what they lie most egregiously about. What are they lying most frequently about? And where are the most obvious departures from truth? And when you look at Trump supporters and what kind of lies they're telling, they will say things like white people invented civilization, which to anybody who knows anything about the course of history and all the different civilizations that have arisen in different parts of the world is a very super egregious lie. And so then you understand what they need and what their psyche is responding to, what they have a hunger for. They want white heroism. Now, why are they even clinging to this word white and saying, yes, we're allowed to feel good about ourselves as white people, and we white people have magically invented civilization on our own? They want that because of that original sin of categorizing people as white or not white in order to immorally profiteer off other people's pain and loss of freedom and destroying their family intactness and all those horrible things that are part and parcel of slavery and the enslavement of humans. They made themselves white people and the guardians of pretend virtue in that way, in order to profit in that criminally immoral, depraved way, and have spent all of that time trying to retroactively make it moral and make themselves the guardians of virtue somehow, and that was just them being benevolent and bringing order to the world. So they have to construct all of these ridiculous fabrications in order to prop up a morality that did not exist. It was not a moral way to behave. Even the lives of poor white people were sacrificed to that false narrative because the Confederacy, through the lives of all of the poor, the non-wealthy white families, to sacrifice that in the Civil War. I'm sure some wealthy white people fought as well. I don't know if you could dodge deferments by claiming bone spurs during the Civil War, but I'm sure they did find some ways to get out of it, and that a lot of the burden was borne by poorer white people who could be persuaded to adopt this heroic narrative that the South, the Confederacy, was being, sorry, not just the South, all of the states involved in the Confederacy were being unfairly treated. In the same way, you can see Trump supporters whip themselves up now into this false sense of deprivation, that white racism, that what do they call it, reverse racism or anti-white racism, is somehow the worst, most blatantly disgusting thing in the world, and it's so prevalent, when we can see from the outside that what they're really bewailing is a loss of normalcy to them, which was the feeling that they could get jobs because their white uncle would definitely give them a job. The feeling out there that somebody is going to say, maybe we should broaden the HR requirements and actually look at everybody's CVs and not just dismiss somebody because they're not part of our white circle of friends, to make it less of an old boys club. We all know white women have been the principal beneficiaries of anti, what's it called, affirmative action, but other people have benefited too, and that sense that Black people were allowed to benefit and people of color were allowed to benefit from broadening eligibility requirements for things, to say, let's not just continue with this unspoken rule that we continue to disperse favors to white people. I mean, it's not always unspoken. It was what redlining was codified. Don't loan to people in these suburbs. I guess they didn't write the word white down, but this implicit dealing out of privileges to white people. What's my big point here? Because I've got to land this plane. My overall point is, some people respond to the loss of white mythic heroism by saying, no, white people are heroes and you're evil for saying we're not. That's one approach. And the other approach is some of the left extremism, which is to say America's always wrong, America's been awful to support Israel, even though it's a morally very complicated issue. Like there's just a lot of complexity to it that I'm not even going to begin to touch on, except to say I feel awful for displaced and oppressed and murdered Palestinian people. I do. But the people who are just joyfully denouncing America and joyfully denouncing Biden in an election year, as if Trump would be better, when Trump has committed himself to literally bombing Gaza to end the war, like to flatten the territory of the Palestinian people and the hopes of the Palestinian people. And yet you have some young people who are so caught up in deriding Joe Biden and deriding America as it exists now that they cannot be rational about this and realize that Trump would be much worse and that he would deport people for supporting Palestinian causes at all. So that's that two-pronged danger now of people who have to oppose America in different ways. A lot of people opposing multi-plural democracy in America, and other people opposing multi-plural democracy because they think it's too supportive of Israel, and they're too intent on viewing America as the bad guy because they've overly embraced the loss of white heroism to go, yes, if we can't be white heroes, then Biden has to be a white devil. Like, oh my gosh, do you really have to do that? Please stop. But hopefully there's still enough white people, I mean, white young people and just young people in general who will hear the dangers that Trump poses to all of us, and particularly to women and minorities, who will get sucked into this theocratic, pro-billionaire coalition of people who want to pull rights away from women and their reproductive health care options, and from children who need labor laws to protect them, to take meal breaks, or just all the things you can see Republicans pulling away at, and will get to do even more if they are allowed to gain power in the federal election. So to my mind, the people who are disengaged pay attention to the noisiest voices. And I love this space because we practice our voices for making noise in a pro-democracy way, in a way that draws people's attention to the actual threats and not to the made-up threats that just hurt people's egos, but to very real practical threats to their day-to-day lives, to their healthcare options, to their family and friends, and to their options for getting jobs in the future. Imagine if Trump gets in office and makes it illegal to ever employ somebody as a diversity advisor, who makes it not just illegal, but makes it just really politically incorrect to hire a non-white person, because it would become so anti the Trump ethos of protect white people's interests and protect poor oppressed white people. Like, imagine a second Trump term in which that's the governing implied morality of the government. So that's very dangerous to so many of us, and ultimately would be bad for the economy as well. I mean, look at what happened to what is happening to the UK as their economy contracts because racism got the upper hand with regards to the Brexit vote, and how that has just shut down their ability to trade with other countries. That was this whole, oh, let's step out of the union because otherwise we have to accept migrants, and migrants are clearly anti our interests. Wrong. Bullet. British word about it. Migrants help grow the economy and are proof that your economy and your country is attractive enough to attract migrants and continue to grow your economy and to grow opportunities for everyone. So everybody suffers when racists or people using racism as a wedge tool to try and garner as much tax breaks, tax subsidies, and benefits to themselves in their wealthy pockets as they possibly can accrue. It's been a big plane. I shall land it there. Thank you so much for letting me have that speech. It's me practicing my voice to speak out for democracy, to be one of the noisy voices as a counterweight to all the noisiness of the misinformed, the selfish, the ego-driven, and the hungry for a false mythology people out there in the world. Thank you. And I appreciate you all.
Well, we appreciate you so much, Davina, for making noise and getting in good trouble and doing all that you can to inform people and to also to inspire them, to have them think in more lofty terms about democracy. Yes, like it is every day, but there is a loftiness to freedom that I think, again, many people in this country just simply take for granted, and that the whole atmosphere in which you live can change in a moment once you are under authoritarian rule. But I have brought someone up. I'm thinking this is Kevin. I don't know, but I'm going to hear from them, then check in on my co-host to see if she'd like to chime in. And then I'm going to pick up again, like I said, a couple other points of history that I want to connect those dots. And then many of you have brought up some things that are occurring with current stories, and I have posted them on my timeline, like Joseph talking about the poll. And there is also in that same thread an article which not only is it the traditional newspapers that are adding to the information ethos these days, social media plays a big role in it as well. So I think it's pretty significant when Jack Dorsey, the person who created this app, then he went and took part in another one, and he just left that one, and he is applauding the owner of this one and specifically saying, all of his layoffs, just his whole management style, all of that basically was cool. It was good. And what he has created here is wonderful. It is freedom technology. And that is scary to me because
Yeah.
that's the same thing that idiot down in the South was saying, he was calling it free Florida, or what was it? It was something, but it was a buzz thing with them. Like, we want to make our state free like Florida. I'm
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? As he's
I,
passing all of these racist,
oppressive
authoritarian
laws.
laws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Additionally, he also made a statement saying that asking people not to use Blue Sky, that they really should be over here on X because it's actually a better platform.
Yes.
It's mind numbing. It is mind
Yes.
numbing.
How do you go from, stepping off the board of, an app that you helped to create, one that you sold to this guy, and now you're coming back and applauding it when, clearly anyone that cares about decent interaction and observance of, just a few rules, not creating a hellscape, but because that's what he's done.
And freedom
And he,
technology should mean fact. It should not
yes,
mean
yes,
propaganda. So that is
yes.
also very troubling to
Mm-hmm.
see that, you're promoting propaganda and you're promoting hate speech. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing now.
Yeah.
That's what we consider the best way to, turn that phrase and call it freedom.
Yeah,
I
see,
just
this
find
is
it,
this is a
yeah,
skill that they are very good at naming, and renaming and reframing, because I think that if someone just heard the word patriot out of the blue, they probably think MAGA at this point. They probably, that's the vision that would
absolutely.
probably come into your head when we know it is something different. Like, they are changing the meaning, the significance, the essence of things. They're flipping it on its head. The
And
same with,
the
yes,
purpose of things.
exactly. And they play with semantics a lot. I mean, like this Christianity thing. And I find that like so ironic because I still remember how they were running around screaming like banshees, especially Glenn Beck. When President Obama was in office and when he was running for office, trying to slap this Muslim identity onto him, and also saying things that were absolutely not true, not just the birther stuff, but I remember them trying to attach a love and a desire and a pursuit and an intent of establishing Sharia law in this country and just terrifying people. And look where we are today. Like, they flipped it on its head. They have taken away women's rights. They have allowed the proliferation of guns in states like mine, in states like North Carolina, where they move toward permitless carry. They want teachers to carry them into the classroom, and no one can know what teacher is carrying this. And they totally just passed the buck when they had a special session to address gun safety measures after we had had a mass shooting here. It's bananas. But we do have someone else who has come up and to speak. So I want to go to, who is this again? No more monkey shines. Okay. But yeah, it's Kevin. So I love
You're
that.
right. I'm bananas over here, Lady D. Yeah, hey, I'm glad to been able to get back in the room. It's quite some time, and I missed you so much. And all the fellow people within this fine, lovely room. Yeah, there's been so much going on lately. I'm glad to see that Brother Jones is fighting the good fight in the Tennessee legislature. I think he's getting a raw deal over there. It just they can't do enough to try and silence him, it seems,
Oh, absolutely not. And he is performative. And the thing of it is it's a response. It was not, his go-to, because he has always gotten this really very um, aggressive, racist kind of, behavior from them.
right.
And it's kind of like a bully. You keep pulling their hair or kicking them and stuff, and nobody sees that, you know half the time. And maybe sometimes people do, and they just think, oh, they're just playing around, or that it's okay because it's him and I don't like him either, or whatever. But it just continues to go on. And people are human. It's Everyone has their point, and I think that he has, this session just reached the point with them because of all the things that they have tried to do to silence him.
Yeah, exactly. It just, and it's frustrating to see, he's trying to do the best that he can with what he has available to him without being silenced or, shut down every chance he gets. And, the people come out to support, and they sit in the gallery, and, it's even to the point where these people are in the gallery and they're silent, and they're being escorted out of the building for what are they doing? And it's their silence is apparently deafening to the Republicans, because they can't stand it in the Tennessee legislature. So they have their
Because
jackbooted
if
thugs tear him out
it's
of
not
the
in
gallery.
support, it's not in support of them. I mean, this
Yeah.
my state is a prime example of fascism in real time. And it could be coming to a state near you if you don't watch out,
Yeah.
because, a little gerrymandering here, a little sneaking
Yeah.
in at a county level there with an extreme uh, MAGA Republican, a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Almost half of this legislature ran unopposed last year.
No, and we got over here in
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, we have, the Pennsylvania Senate, which is it's 3-1 Republican versus Democrat. So I don't envision that ever in my lifetime changing. I will be, I'm extremely happy that we do have a very slim and tenuous majority House. And I say that because we've had a lot of people that have either left for other positions, or we've had these special elections up, and thankfully we've held the line and have been able to retain that, because that's the only thing that's allowing Piro to get an agenda through. And thankfully, I think been able to reach across the aisle through the Senate to get things done. I mean, it's very encouraging to hear that we have a $14 billion surplus that's not being blown through. The thing that's disconcerting to me is we still have people like Scott Perry that are a big problem for us over here. Granted, he's not in the Pennsylvania House, but still he represents our state, and that's not a good look for us. One of those deep diehard January Sixers that are out there. But it is what it is. I wanted to let you know, Dean. I don't know if you saw it in my feed from this weekend, but I got into a little tete-a-tete with a young lady from South Carolina, I believe it was, or North Carolina, about charters. You and I have a big thing, the problems with charter schools, and how it's a huge grift for the people that want to have these charter schools. They take the vouchers, and the administrators, they become wealthy off of it, and there's no accountability. Well, I got back in a tete-a-tete with her over that, and I basically jammed a lot of good facts up her keister, shall we say, that she didn't know how to respond. It was the normal, it was the short responses like sure, and your thinking is short, and things like that, and just a lot of snarkiness from her. But it felt good to throw it back in her face. And I had another gentleman helping me out here, but I wanted to let you know because it's still out there yet. They keep pushing this whole thing, and and a lot of people aren't aware that this this whole big problem that the Republicans have with it is that, once again, they want to have the charters, because they have that zero accountability. They can become wealthier, but then the teachers are underpaid. They're not unionized. There's zero proof of the building. Sometimes there's no buildings at all. They have these so-called charter schools with these vouchers, and then they like to claim like, well, it's our freedom of choice. Well, yeah, it's a freedom of choice, but if it's going to tear into the downward dollars that go towards our public education system and affect those students and the ability to fund those, then I have a big problem, because charter schools tend to be, I hate to say it, more racially non-diverse. They don't cater to or assist with special needs children. So there's a lot of problems with it that just, leave a bad taste in the mouth. Like I said, it leaves the public school system underfunded. Schools have stranded costs. So when a public school loses a percentage of students to charter schools or voucher programs, the school can't they can't reduce the cost by an equivalent percentage. They still have to pay for utility, maintenance, transportation, food costs. It's a bad thing all the way around. And there's no way that we can get around it unless we can keep them in check. But once again, getting back to the Department of Education, when Carter divested the Department of Education from, it was Health and Human Services at that time in '79, he got a lot of backlash for it. And as soon as Reagan started running for his tenure as president, the first thing he brought up was getting rid of the Department of Education. So here, this has been going on for over 40 plus years that the Republicans have
Because
been trying to
that's
get rid of it.
part of that was part of the mandate for leadership, which is what has morphed into the Project 2025.
Correct.
That's where his whole agenda came from, that playbook. They just didn't get as far along as they had hoped, and now they've updated it. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's unfortunate, because they want to get rid of that oversight. And once again, that's the whole thing that keeps our education system in check, is oversight.
Yeah.
You
Well,
have to have that.
yeah, but these are the same people who don't want regulation in anything, and
Right.
certainly not in education. And again, as you said, it is also something that they have eyed as an opportunity to grift. And there are stories out there of states, I think Arizona is one of them, Ohio may be another, where they have bankrupted cities or, destroyed school systems. Texas is an example of a takeover that is wreaking havoc on that community. Certainly the students, but the school system, and I view those as kind of like a little microcosm of a democracy, a little miniature one. And so
Yeah.
it's like they're just destroying it. And I believe in people, and I believe in people like Lauren Ashley, who were inspired to run because of it. And I believe that there are others like her, just as I believe there are others like me here in Tennessee, because I help work in an organization with them, and I know, and this is the work that we have to do. And just kind of being aware, you're a military person, so you get this, but you need to be aware of your enemy. So to say, you need to know your foe and understand them. And that again is part of why I try to bring the historical aspects to these things, because it's oftentimes their behavior is like reported on as strange, or like not but when in reality some of this stuff has been going on since the founding of this country. and it is just even the most horrific things have kind of been smoothed over and swept away to the point of almost being forgotten. And that's
Yeah,
again,
it's it's frustrating, but I do not give up because as like you and I always say, it's good trouble, and I continue to get in good trouble. I get my patties smacked a few times, but you know what? I got thick skin. I think I can take it. I like to hit them with snarkasm, if you want to call it that.
I know. And I mean, you can determine like uh, when you want to do that, if you want to do that. I have a lot of my mutuals who do that and who do it quite well. My co host, I think, had a little time last week where maybe she was engaged in a little bit of that.
Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you have to do it sometimes because it's a I would say how should we say a brain cleanser, because if we get stuck in the weeds of despair and disgust, it tends to tear you down, and I won't let them tear me down. So I have to dip in there with that snarkasm from time to time just to cleanse my mind and bring some humor to the whole ridiculousness of their cultish behavior. And it's not just that they want to get rid of the Department of Education, like you said, they want to get rid of all of all we have to do is read that. If you have the time to digest and shake your head a lot in between reading Project 2025, it is pretty darn terrifying to think what they would push for if, God forbid, they get the ability to do it and the chance to do it. We just and that's where it's going to come down to our steadfastness throughout these next 6 months to ensure that we keep pressing and pressing and pressing for people to open up their eyes, open up their ears, and realize that what you're seeing in front of you that they're saying is just the tip of the iceberg. And, people forget that, what's on top of surface isn't as bad as what's on the bottom of the surface. The bottom of the surface is worse because all you have to do is look at that one example of the Titanic, because it wasn't the top that damaged the ship, it was the bottom. And if we lose track of that, which not visible to us, and we refuse to look at what's beneath the surface, that's where we're going to get suckered in, and we're not going to be prepared to fight for what we have to fight for if we are blinded to what we refuse to see, or what we can see. So
And that is why we come and have this discussion every week to help people take the blinders off, to be able to see clearly and understand and get, make sure that they're finding good content. And then when you have the content, make sure you get the context, like you have an
yeah.
understanding. So that is so key in this time. Well, Kevin, I do have a few other speakers up. It has been awesome hearing from you. I hope you are not a stranger, that we get an opportunity to have you joining us in conversation again. And you can stay up here, but I want to move to Dr. Marshall and then Greg, and then check in on my co-host and pick back up with our little history. And I'll move a little quickly through that. So, all right, Dr. Marshall, how are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Miss D. Hello, Soul Sister. And to everyone in the room and to everyone who has spoken thus far. I actually had planned to be silent and just listen. Dee is actually covering something that I've been researching. And let me slow down. I think it was Dee, but it might have been Soul's sister, but one of them. And just in case I'm still foggy, someone who has spoken talked about the fact that we can become overwhelmed, perhaps even a little bit depressed about a lot of what we read, a lot of what we're seeing, especially if we are just a little bit in tune with what has happened before. And as Dee said, if we don't know our history, if we don't study what has happened before, we're so bound to repeat it intentionally in many instances and unintentionally. As I said at the beginning, it was my intent actually to just listen. I'm not exactly feeling 100%. There's nothing specific wrong. I'm just tired. My tiredness is a mental fatigue of reading about the things that we as Black and brown people have fought for centuries to overcome, to push aside, to tear apart, to burn down, to destroy in whatever ways we could, both legally and quote unquote illegal. I don't know if they were illegal or not. I wasn't there necessarily, but my point is I try every day to post the on this day or on this day history, what happened on this day. And there are just some days when I am so angry that I don't know where to channel that anger. Leaving it within is certainly not good. It's not healthy. But I'm at that stage of my life where I'm reliving my life, not because I want to, but because on this day. So Dee she started out with Jefferson Davis. One of the things I've been doing for about 3 months now is writing down a list of on this day events that occurred or have occurred and continue to occur during my lifetime. So, for example, one of the things I wrote down, and I repost them. Sometimes I comment, sometimes I don't. But, today, May 13th in 1985, Move was attacked by the police in Philadelphia. I remember that as though it were yesterday, but only at this point in my life can I really look at it and analyze it. And I have about 2 pages of events between 1885 and today, May 13th, that I've just noted because I want to write about them, not in detail, but just a list and then comment on how they have impacted my life, especially the ones that occurred that I can remember seeing on television. Or maybe even like in 1968, I was actually on the street watching the quote protesters slash rioters just light stores apart, light stores afire. And just so much. Closing my eyes, I can put myself right there. As I'm listening to the space, a notice popped up about Crystal Welch, who is now deceased. This happened, she was murdered yesterday. She, her
Yeah, I
mother,
just
and a
saw that.
sister. So I Googled it to find out a little bit more. Ida Welch, her mother, Vicky Renee Welch, her sister, and Crystal Welch. Crystal Welch is who stands out and who the report is on because she was a professor at the Mississippi College of the School of Law in Mississippi. But more than that, she was the person who brought the not boycott, but she started the protest against the flag of Mississippi. And ultimately, I didn't read everything and I can't remember, but I think the flag of Mississippi was changed and that they were one of the states still including the Confederate flag as part of the flag of Mississippi. That this woman, 42 years old, would be murdered in her home on yesterday or sometime within the last 48 hours with her mother and her sister infuriates me. It just breaks my heart. Here is a woman who is contributing to our society to make all of America better, to make all of America and its inhabitants, its citizens, the immigrants, to push us forward into a better world, a better America. And somebody, I don't know who, I didn't read enough of the article to see. As far as I know, they didn't have any suspects when this particular article was published a couple of hours ago. Who knows what they know now? Who knows what they already know but haven't released to the public? But one of the things in the first article that I pulled up, ironically, was a discussion of the Confederacy. So, it's just so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking that we African Americans, brown and black people, brown and in between, we are dying for the same things that our parents, our grandparents, and in some instances, even our great grandparents, our ancestors whom we never knew, died for, so that we could be here in advocacy arena to talk about these freedoms. Not that we necessarily thought we had 100%, but as Dee said, yes, some progress has been made. Sometimes we say a lot of progress. I'm at the stage of my life where I begin to wonder, is it a teaspoonful of progress? Is it a quart? Is it a third? Is it a half a cup? Just how much progress. I've been thinking about this a lot, not just because of the on this day, quote unquote, but because I've been looking at the photos in my family collection. I've been reading the letters that my grandmother wrote in 1910. Other family members wrote in 1895. I've been looking at pictures that I have of my family that go back into the 1870s. And I cringe when I think they say we weren't educated. They say so much about us that's so untrue. And we continue to thrive, to survive. We're not just, what's the phrase? When you're in the water and you don't treading. My brain
Treading.
treading. We're
Mm-hmm.
threading. We're threading the water too. We're treading. We're
Mm-hmm.
doing all these things. I'm just so angry right now because this woman should not have lost her life like so many others. And I initially thought, before that little piece of news popped up, I told myself, no, you're not going to talk today, but you will raise your hand to say one thing, and that was encourage the rest of the group, to encourage their followers and others to read the On This Day in History. I started screenshooting certain portions of the On This Day narrative because I started to feel, rightly or wrongly, that perhaps people were just reading On This Day, Mary Marshall got on Advocacy Arena and, oh my goodness, we've never heard her talk like that. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. But my point is, please read the On This Day, whether I posted or EIG posted or whomever posts the On This Day. We must learn our history. Crystal Welch is a prime example of someone who was doing wonderful things, teaching law, being active in her community, culturally, spiritually, politically, educationally, and now we mourn her loss. We mourn her contributions that were not made, that were cut short. We mourn her mother and her sister. I don't know their contributions specifically, but they contributed because they were women in our society. Her mother, as the Bible would say, her mother beget her sister who is older than Crystal, and then her mother beget her. I don't know what the other members of the family. I am just totally blown away that we continue to be murdered and why. There are instances, one instance that came up just a couple of days ago, a black man in, it seems, nothing that I don't already
Florida,
know.
the military young man.
The man who just wanted some water,
Oh
and he
no,
was
this is
walk.
another. Yeah,
There
this
are
is
so many. He was just walking up a driveway, happened to be that of a white woman, a white person who lived there. And she starts to scream and accuse him of rape. The man just wanted some water. He never got to really say that. Ultimately, yes, at some point, I guess they found out. But what happens to him? He's killed, he's murdered for water. Well, that's no different necessarily from all of the young children, thousands of them who marched in Alabama, in Birmingham, to help start the civil rights protest movement of the 1960s. They wanted what you and I want, what we in this space, on this app, in this world want. We want peace. We want freedom. We want to live and enjoy the life that we have. But at the same time, we must know what happened before so that we can, in all the ways that we know and don't know, try to raise the level, raise the requirements, knock down the statues. The idea that last week Alabama goes back and reverses itself. They had removed 4 years ago the names of Confederate generals or officers from these schools, and they get back together and they vote again to put these names back up. What kind of madness is that? Oh my goodness, it's the madness of racism, it's the madness of white privilege. And I could go on and on and on and be off the topic. I'm just angry and I'm hurt that we have lost another one of us. And I just wanted to step in for a moment to talk about Crystal Welch. I posted another article as a reply to the initial one that I saw, so that people would have a little more idea of who she was and what she did. And I just encourage you to read the On This Day, in addition to keeping up with the other madness that's happening every day. So maybe we should create a line, not a line, but a listing called Every Day instead of On This Day. Because On This Day seems to be every day, and it seems and feels to me like it's every day since my ancestors lived. And it's that which makes me feel somewhat depressed. It's that which makes me feel ill, because I've just been reading this and doing my best to put my mask on, to read it, to digest it, but not ingest it, to, I guess, should be the opposite, to ingest it but not really digest it. I don't want it as part of my being. I don't want it in my cell. But at the same time, I need to know it so that I can do my little part in trying to prevent it, so that my nieces and nephews and grandnieces and nephews can somehow be free of this memory. Know it, but not experience it as a living part of their 21st, 22nd, and so forth reality. Thank you, Dee, for listening to me ramble. Thank you, Soul Sister. Thank you, Joseph and Greg and all of the others who spoke before me. Davina, thank you so much. You were wonderful. We're all wonderful, but sometimes what one person says just strikes a chord within us that vibrates and reverberates in our system more and longer than others.
You're absolutely
I'll have a drink of something that I won't say, and land my plane, as everyone says. Thank you.
well. Thank you, Dr. Marshall, for coming up and being so vulnerable and just opening your heart to us, but to call on us to tap into our humanity. And that is what you were expressing in your own way, the constant trauma that we have endured, that we continue to endure, makes healing so very difficult. And it is important that we apply the balm to ourselves, sometimes to others, wherever and whenever we can, because the struggle is a lifetime. I mean, it truly is. And we keep working toward that perfection of this multi-plural democracy, but we have these moments, these inflection points that stop us and in some ways take us back. And so we have to then fight new battles. We have to fight old battles, and it gets a little tiring, especially when you start to get about our age, because it's like, I thought we were done
Excuse
with that.
me. I don't know about your age.
But it just when you've lived, and it's not really
Thank
like,
you.
yeah, and that's what I'm really referring to. Like, you start to recognize some things, and they're not great memories, not all of them, and to have to continue to be subjected and reminded of them. It does weigh you down. And again, I promise you, that is why I keep Representative Lewis's post, his tweet at the time, as my pin post, because I do truly find it helps me to not stay stuck. It's not saying we don't feel. I think that we would not be human if we didn't feel, but to not get stuck in our feelings is the important thing. And I think that Representative Lewis and the way that he lived and operated in his activism, to me, just kind of epitomizes that. And it helps me sometimes to find like real people like that I can kind of relate to. Not necessarily because I'm like them, but maybe I aspire or admire certain qualities in them, and just kind of look to them. What's that saying? Like, look to the light, look to the light. So I feel like what you have described here, Dr. Marshall, is someone who many people were looking at and should have been looking at. And she was light. And a lot of times our lights do get taken out before time or dim. But anyway, we do have a few other speakers. So I just thank you and sending you virtual hugs. So up next, I think it's Greg.
Can
Then,
we get to LMZ first,
yeah,
and then go to Greg because I think she's at
that's
work.
true. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Greg is before me. Thank you, Greg. I asked to just come up because I'm working and can't speak today, but I wanted to give an update to Dr. Marshall's story because I actually have a live real-time update. They have given an update that the son of the mother and Crystal Welch's and Vicky Welch's brother is who murdered all three of them yesterday. And he has been killed in a shootout with Arizona state troopers when they tried to apprehend him. He's been on the run from Mississippi since yesterday, Mother's Day, when he went to the home and shot to death his mother and his two sisters. The U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force has been involved since yesterday afternoon when an arrest warrant was obtained, and they've been tracking him. It started at 3:30 yesterday afternoon, and they had gotten a wellness call about the home. And so they got there, and that's when, before any of this came out, they were just saying 3 dead. I first heard about the story, let me be clear, before they had even identified the victims, because as you know, I'm tied into the way you can do Google searches and get things for what you want to know about. So I'm tied into anything that has to do with guns in this country. So I already had gotten a notification that 3 family members were dead in the same house on Mother's Day. And then it was saying mother and 2 sisters. And so I'm like, what in the world? And so, of course, I didn't know that it was Crystal Welch, who is this, extraordinary human being, extraordinary professor at Mississippi College's School of Law, on the executive board at the newspaper. When you read her biography, is just amazing who and what she was, what she gave, what she did, the advocate she was, what she did for children, what she did for families, what she did around child welfare, domestic violence, etc. So I didn't know any of that. I just want to make that clear. I just knew that 3 people had been killed in the same household. And so what that did for me, again, was have me, Lauren, as you all know, go back to, tragically, as you talked about, Dr. Marshall, our thread that should be every day. Well, then that would always go into the thread of every day, because every day would be another day in this country where over 110 people die in this country due to gun violence. That's not to mention how many people are harmed severely by gun violence, and not to mention how many people live the rest of their lives with untreated PTSD because we live in the United States of guns. So there is trauma if you survive a mass shooting. There is trauma if you're a school child that grows up going through school shooting drills. There is trauma to people that have listened to the sounds of guns, etc. All of this is untreated PTSD in this country. So for me, it was like, okay, hashtag every day. Mother's Day, people have been shot dead. And so then I've been digging all day to keep trying to get updates. And so this is the most recent update.
Thank you
So
for that.
yes, ma'am, but that doesn't take away anything of your testimony. Let me make that very clear. Not that you need me to validate your lived experience, Dr. Marshall, or your testimony. The testimony about the fact that Black people continue to be killed in 2024 by white supremacy stands. What also stands, of course, and what can be true in advocacy arenas, that two things can be true at one time. And so what is also true is that in this country, we have untreated mental illness. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We have untreated mental illness. We have mental illness that has skyrocketed since the pandemic. It is at exponential amounts. It is exploding in our public school systems when the Republicans across the country are making decisions to cut funding to school social workers, school counselors, teachers, support systems. All of that is being cut. We have a mental health crisis where they're trying to cut the Affordable Care Act. They're trying to cut people's insurance and access to be able to pay and afford to get mental health. Suicide is at such an increase. We now have social media, TikTok especially, glorifying suicide as if it is something in style or popular or should be recreated or should be a trend or should be your response to when things are happening. We are truly at a crisis. The Surgeon General has spoken about it. Vice President speaks about it. The President speaks about it. So what am I going to say? And then I'm gone. We are at a devastating place when it comes to mental health. We have been at a genocide when it comes to this country and how many Americans die due to the amount of guns in this country. We have more guns than we have people. Do I know the story of why this son yesterday would make a decision to take a gun and shoot his own mother and his own two sisters to death? No. Can I diagnose him? Do I have a clinical degree to diagnose him? No. But can I tell you right now that the combination of guns and people that are not mentally healthy lead to these type of situations and these type of domestic violence tragedies? Yes. Yes, I can tell you that in my professional capacity. I can tell you that. And I can tell you that these things do not occur in other countries. And you don't have to believe me for that. You can Google it. This does not occur. This is not a normal, regular reaction or response to other people in other countries. Do other people have mental health crises? Yes, not like Americans. Not like Americans. So does that mean depression or anxiety or great grief or bipolar or affect disorder or any of that exists to other people having a human experience? Of course it does. But in other places, their response is not to take a gun and respond to the people that they think in that moment somehow are responsible or who they're upset with or whatever the case may be. That does not happen. This is an American problem. The most progressive administration around mental health, the most progressive administration around common sense gun safety reform, and the most comparing and compassionate, as you saw last week, for them starting the suicide prevention office has been the Biden-Harris administration. So everything that is happening where people are constantly saying they are not going to vote, or they're unaffiliated, or they're third party, is so harmful that you can even bring it down to the micro level of what just happened to the Welch family yesterday while they were trying to enjoy a Mother's Day visit with each other. And I mean that. And I mean that without trying to sensationalize the trauma and the grief and the brokenness forever, and the beauty of that family, that beautiful Black family that has been broken now by domestic violence and gun violence. And I pray sincerely for the survivors of that family, for their trauma and their grief. But I would say that the people that are in the Twitterverse, not here with us in Advocacy Arena podcast, because obviously they're contrarians and have a different agenda, but that are working so hard to ensure that Biden and Harris are not reelected in November, are putting at risk those three such important offices that are trying to pass legislation, that are passing executive orders, are doing the things so that other families, like the Welch families, don't have to experience this type of horrible suffering that no family should have to go through. And with that, Dr. M, I also want to just send you love today for being who and what you always are, and for always being so authentic and sharing your truth with us, and letting us not forget, especially the white people who are honored to be able to join this space and hear from such important Black voices like yours and Miss D's and Soul Sisters, to not forget, and that things are not that long ago, because these are your lived experiences and your memories. And that all of this, again, and always eventually ties down to white supremacy. And that's why we have to do all we can to keep white supremacy out of the White House on November 5th. With that, I thank you for letting me go above Greg, and I will land my plane. Thank you so much.
Oh, my dear, thank you. And yes, thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. And appreciate you giving us the latest update on that, and the encouraging words that you always leave with us, and the reminder about the horrendous issue that is uniquely American. It breaks my heart. I really have to unplug from television and from news sometime. And there's one channel that I really avoid because they basically are giving me the crime blotter, and it just breaks my heart. And to see these deaths, the gun violence that's being inflicted upon our young daily in our community, and they want to just lock them up, then put them back out there and allow them to have gun rights before they have voting rights. Yes. And make it just possible to go anywhere. It's as if they want us to really destroy ourselves, recreating the Wild Wild West, and the fittest of the fit, survives. And that is also too part of white supremacy, white Christian nationalism. I think some people want to get more precise with the terms, but that type of apocalyptic kind of theology is very much a part of them. It starts with this mythalization, like they want to they have this myth of this white Christian nation. So the fact that this country is getting very close to the point where they will be a literal minority terrifies them to no ends. Kind of like when we got our first Black president, they almost lost their ever loving minds. That's how we got Trump. And that is the ebb and flow of our history, because what I'm, sharing with you, I hope you can kind of see that every time there are advances and victories and justice had, there is always been this segment of our citizenry that is going to lash out if it does not include them or look like them or look like they expected to look. And that is basically, white Jesus and all his white followers and a white nation. And if you're not, then, you are subjugated to the white people because they are superior, because it is all about white supremacy, and the religious aspect of Christian nationalism is a cherry on top, and it is just being used as a political vehicle to power, because ultimately that is the goal, that is the end. Hitler had the same playbook in Germany, which is, as you often will recall, that I read the quote from Martin Muller quite often in here. And I often tell people a little bit of his bio. And he was a Lutheran pastor. A Lutheran pastor. I also remind people that Charlie Kirk was funded by some of these billionaires to start a propaganda program in the church, the colleges and the high schools, and it was a very libertarian kind of free thinking type of more economic kind of talk. An agenda that he had. It was basically the Heritage Foundation that and kind of thing. But a few years ago, he flipped and he decided he was going to put his eggs in the Christian nationalist basket. When earlier, a few years ago, he denounced them, some of the extremists. And I'm telling you that because that's like a shift and a change that is occurring, that is being stirred up, and that we need to be, like aware of. But I forgot, I still do have Greg up here, and then I'm going to go to my fabulous co-host. I need to get some tea. Greg, you're next. Do we
Okay.
lose you? All right.
No, I'm right here. I was just busy for a moment. That was good to hear. And I'm grateful that I was able to uh let LMC go ahead of me, because what she had to say was very important. She's an icon here in advocacy arena, and I'll always bow down to that. Much love and respect for both LMC and Dr. Marshall. Yeah, and I also wanted to bring up that I also saw that Solicitor was upset a couple of weeks ago. You mentioned that a little while ago, D, and I'm hopefully I'm able I'm glad to say that that Solicitor is still here on Twitter, because I know she felt very upset, very angry, very distraught, and I'm glad she's still with us. There is a couple of things that I do want to mention that I'm not sure most people are aware of. Now, when we do these spaces here on Twitter, we don't get the opposition any kind of platform, because we know what they're all about. They're all about conspiracy theories, BS, and lies. And they're basically about protecting Trump and everything he's doing. It's quite different on TikTok. They actually they want the opposition to come up when they do their lives, and then the opposition, they like to pivot from the issue, which is most of the time Trump, what he's doing in court, what he has done in the past, with like his pageant that he used to own, and a number of other things. And the thing about that is, we don't give them platform in our spaces here on Twitter, because we know what they're all about. They're drinking too much of that Kool-Aid or eating too many orange crayons. I don't know. I don't really care. You just can't fix stupid, but you sure as hell can make fun of it. And I love doing that. But that's a whole different ball game on TikTok, because they just give the opposition too much room. Give the opposition just too much space to come up with their conspiracy theory. And I'm gonna say it time and time again. I've said it time and time again, that you're not going to change any minds when it comes down to MAGA. They're too far in, they're too far deep with Trump. Has he lost a considerable amount of his base? Yeah, but he still has a huge base out there. So you can't underestimate them. They are pretty they're pretty out there. They're pretty I guess the word is loony. Just trying to be nice. But they're out there. They're running their conspiracy theories. They're saying all sorts of bullshit. When you confront them with facts, they like to pivot to something else, like Obama or Clinton, or even go as far back as Jimmy Carter. They're pathetic. So the idea that you're going to change any MAGA's minds, especially those who have been doing too much crayon eating and orange juice drinking, you're not going to change their minds. They're just way too they're way too into Trump to ever want to change. And this idea about them, anybody who's unwilling to make their decision on who they're going to vote for, I don't even want to try to talk with them, because I'm done. I'm done with trying to say the reasons why Biden is more is Biden perfect? No, but he's doing his best. He's the better choice because he's getting things done. And I'm tired of trying to explain that to people. Especially the undecided voters. You can only do so much before you give up on trying to get through to them people. So my best advice is just don't try to change MAGA. Let them run with the bullshit that they're running with. Let them bury themselves. Don't try to change their minds. Don't waste your time. If you feel that you're not getting through to them, just either one of two things: either let it go or just make fun of them, like I do. And from that point, I'll land my plane. Thank you for having me up here, D and Soul Sister.
Well, thank you, Greg. And that is pretty much my policy. I appreciate you sharing it, and that being yours, and you're encouraging people. But by all means, I don't try to tell people what to do, but I find that it leaves me peaceful, more peaceful, let me say. And so I thank you. And up next, we have Joseph, and then I want to check in on my co-host, and we're going to start to wind down here in maybe the next 30, 45 minutes. So Joseph, you have the floor.
Thanks, Ms. D. Boy, it's been some wonderful, wonderful speakers as usual. I do want to kind of piggyback on something that you said a little while ago. That's kind of why I wanted to come back up. Talking about this white Christian nationalism. It got me started thinking about how 2020, how after George Floyd was murdered and, millions of people took to the street and, because they're angry, we were hurting as a country. We were already hurting because of COVID. And then to see this brutal racially based murder happen in front of our eyes, it was just such a, I don't think even pain point is a good way to describe it, but just people were angry, people were hurt. It was a national time of hurt. And what did the former guy do? He threw gasoline on the fire. Instead of trying to bring people together, instead of trying to make people feel better, he threw gasoline on the fire with white national rhetoric. And I tell you, the moment what I really lost was that ridiculous photo when he had nerve to go and stand in front of a church and hold up a Bible, which he didn't hold up the right way. But, and some of you know I'm not particularly religious, but as a former Catholic, to see such an act of blasphemy by somebody who does not any way, shape, or form practice what Christ taught, that set me over the edge. That was probably the one moment throughout those 4 years that I was and I was angry a lot 4 years, and I'm sure all of us were. But that told me right there was that we had to win that election. So I kind of want everybody to think about how angry we were in 2020, and we need that anger to drive us to the polls in November, because I don't want to go through like that again. And I don't want to live under a white nationalist country. I don't. We've just seen what happens when racists are allowed to take. And so, kind of like Greg said, we're not going to change MAGA. They're so far gone. We're not going to change them. But like what I've said in this space before, what I've said in my own spaces, and what I've said, I know in Shantae's space, that when I tweet, I just tweet and let the chips fall where they may, and hope that sometimes they will fall on a set of eyes that maybe didn't know something before, and that maybe I am informing somebody. But so yeah, so that's when you got me thinking, Ms. D, about that, and kind of also the white nationalism, to kind of tie it into a bit of geopolitical matters, which I will not go far into the weeds on. But part of why I don't trust the Republicans at all when it comes to their supposed support of Israel. And this is why: because it ties in their fanatical Christian fever dreams about the rapture, that supposedly Israel needs to be intact for the rapture. They could care less about the people of Israel itself. They could care less about anybody else in that region, but they need Israel to be intact for the rapture. So that ties to this notion of white Jesus and their white nationalism beliefs. So I don't trust them at all. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for letting me come back up, Ms. D.
Well, I'm glad you did, and you made some very good points. Absolutely, it is strategic for them, their cause, and their agenda. It is. It has nothing to do with the people of Israel, not the ones that they don't see as useful. BB is useful to them, as Donald is useful to what used to pass as the Republican Party, but it's dying, and so I do feel your sentiment very deeply. I don't trust them with anything, and in fact, they're like stoking, I believe, and then they're also using it to paint these narratives around certain professors at certain universities to help push their DEI agendas, their wish lists, get that fulfilled, and also to paint this current administration with a bad brush, a bad stroke, by not handling the protest or the war well. I mean, they will still sometimes, they don't have to as much now because they have this Hamas and Israel conflict going on. They were pulling back, reaching back to try to pin the botched, their words, Afghanistan withdrawal, when this is where context matters, that he basically was just carrying out a plan that was already put in place by the former guy, and so he was doing this as the president of the United States, and our current president understands and adheres to, laws and decency and statesmanship. And we know that the former guy doesn't care so much about that stuff and will can be expected to deviate from the norms or the legal things. But I do have Carmen up. So glad that she came up. So I want to get her here in the conversation as we start to wind down. I'm glad you popped up. So what's going on?
Good afternoon, Dee. Good afternoon, Soul, and everyone here. You're like my family. Well, I just wanted to chime in. I bet I missed a whole lot, and I have to go back to hear it because I had the volume all the way down on the cell just so I can make phone calls and talk to patients. So,
Because you're working. I get it. I understand.
yeah, so sorry. So I'm always trying to catch up, and it's been, it is what it is, right? We have to work. But I just wanted to remind everyone to do their part. I had a conversation with my granddaughter that's in Atlanta. She had no clue there was a primary going on in Atlanta. Had no clue. She said, "Grandma, I went to the library. They were asking me, am I here to vote?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not here to vote." But I'm like, this is the reason. I said, you got to be involved. So yes, not everybody is in tune with what's happening in their state. People are working. They have busy lives. And voting is not on their agenda. And 23, so I'm trying to get her, connected with folks that can help her there. I even said to her, go to the website that was sent to you. Please register and screenshot it to me so I can have proof that you did register to vote. She admitted she's only voted one time in the state of New Jersey. And she's 23. So, and another thing, there's a lot of people that from New Jersey, from other states that are on Facebook. They are also not in tune with everything that's happening because, like, life happens, people working, especially in New Jersey. They are working 2 and 3 jobs because the rent is high, everything's high, so they're not in tune. So what I'm doing is trying to put some clip. Will they catch on the message? I'm not sure, but I'm still trying. I'm still trying to get the word out how important it is to vote in our election, especially in this one. I think it's imperative. I don't want to live in a Christo fascist country like Hungary and other countries. I mean, that's never been seen here in America, you know? So I hope people wake up and, forget about the two old guys that are voting that they don't like, and vote for the person that's going to save your rights. There's only one person trying to keep your rights versus the other one. So I hope people use common sense and not be so just kind of their focus on that number. Biden is old, and Trump is old, and we need a third candidate, which is the wrong wrong idea, because we don't have a third party that's going to win. It's only to kind of throw a wrench into the whole election to try to peel votes off of one party or the other. So like I said, whatever you can do, chip in and try to help out, because not everybody is in tune with what's happening like us, so we should do our part. That's all I wanted to share. And then, of course, I'll have to listen to the beginning of the space. Thank you, Dee and Soul Sister. Love you guys.
Well, right back at you, and I'm glad that you came up. And yes, the first part of the space, I gave a little bit of a history lesson. Maybe a little boring, but I think it's important because
I caught that part.
okay,
I
well,
did
that's
caught
it.
it.
Then you didn't really miss anything. So, we've just had, I think, kind of an organic, flowing, meandering conversation, but very pertinent. And I love what you just said, and we've talked about this before, that not everyone is going to be news junkies like myself or some of you in here, or even keep up with what's going on in politics. And sometimes maybe they tune in here and there, but they don't tune in enough to understand the terminology, the players, and those kinds of things. So maybe they tune out. And when you know those people in your real life circle and you're able to kind of communicate and connect with them, I think that that's how we start to gain a lot of influence as well. And that is where some of, I feel, the most important kind of nitty gritty, boots on the ground kind of work that it's going to take. And that truly does make a difference. And you might think, oh, this is just this one person, but it's that ripple effect. You don't know, like, you get them to vote and understand and get them engaged, and then, they get someone else, and it just continues to grow. And I hope that this is a contagious community. I hope
It's
it
it's
spreads.
planting. What I say is planting the seed, right? If I can plant that seed to my 23-year-old granddaughter, right? She's gonna be talking to her friends, and she's at the hospital, just got a job, she's gonna go to school for nursing. She loves her grandmama because I'm a nurse. So she'll say to her friend, hey, my grandmama's getting me to vote. She's gonna get me to register, and you guys should do the same thing. So that seed you're planting.
Yeah, exactly. And like we also, some of us discuss, Greg and others, you talk in terms of planting seeds, recognizing the quality of the ground where the seed is being placed. Like, you knew that your granddaughter was fertile ground, so to speak, that, it was worthy to invest. But some of these others are not, those rock hard, cracked open, just dried up MAGA fields, and that's MAGA on the right and the left. And it's go time. And we don't have time to convince people or snap them out of cultish behavior. Because at this point, if you are living in America and you are observing anything that's going on, you have to understand beyond these men's age, yes, not being a good thing, that there is one good man trying to do some good things for a lot of people versus another one who is continuing to try to avoid accountability and is always out on the stump talking about the retribution that he is going to wreak on everyone. I don't know. I'm not trying to take any chances with this kind of guy. And so, anywho, I will. T-Bug came up, and then
It looks like we lost Rosie. She was
I
up for a
know.
second.
That's
Yeah.
what I was looking at. It
Yeah.
may have been her connection, but if she can come back up, we'll squeeze her in there. But we'll hear from T-Bug, and then I'm gonna
Hi,
go
T
to
Bug.
you. Okay. Hey, T-Bug.
Hey,
Oh,
sorry.
Rosemary's back. Okay, good. Hang on a second, T-Bug.
Sure, no problem.
I'm glad you came up. Rosemary, you have the floor, my dear. I'm so glad you came up. She may not have been able to hear us, which is why. Rosemary, can you hear?
It looks like she's in a listener. Yeah, she
Yeah,
is. It looks like
I
she's in the
see.
listener.
I see her up as
I
a
see her
speaker.
up as speaker.
Yeah, I think she's having some
Oh,
Are
connection
you
here she
guys?
problems.
goes.
Are you?
Here she
This is.
goes.
Yeah.
Are you guys talking to me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, oh my gosh! I am so sorry. I thought there was another Rosemary in here. Uh,
Did you hit it by accident, or did you want to have something to add to our conversation here?
I think I accidentally hit it. I was taking my dog out, and when I take him out to go to the
That's
bathroom, I
okay. It
listen.
happens. It happens. I understand. No
My bad,
worries.
guys. I'm so sorry. So
No
anyway,
problem.
you keep going. I love your space. You give me hope. Literally hope. Thank
Oh, well,
you.
that's good. I'm glad. So, T-Bug, then you do have the floor, my dear.
Okay, great. Hi. How are you guys doing?
Doing
Doing
great. How
good.
about yourself?
Doing a lot better. I was sick for like 2 weeks and lost
Oh,
my voice.
my goodness.
Yes. Yeah, you got your voice.
Yay!
Yay.
Yeah, so
I'm glad you're feeling some better and sorry that you were ill.
well, yeah, I mean, I hear there's this thing going around. It's like a sinus thing that turns into
Mm-hmm.
almost 2 weeks of laryngitis, but I'm
Yeah.
doing a lot better now. And, prednisone and antibiotics did wonders for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so I just thought I'd speak a little bit about Oregon politics since our primary ends on May 21st. We're fortunate enough to have mail-in voting since the late 90s. So we don't even have to use the mail. We have drop boxes everywhere in our library outside of our city halls. And so I feel for everyone that doesn't have that. And I really feel privileged to have that option. We do have a couple of races for the primary that are impactful. In District 5, the Congressional District 5, OR5, we have a race where we potentially have the opportunity to have the first Black Congresswoman of Janelle Bynum. And I just put that above in the nest. I was also going to share that Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, sorry, I can't talk, is joining her tomorrow on virtually tomorrow morning. So if anyone wants to join, you can donate like $1 and join that as well. And then she has a thing with Higher Pack on Instagram as well. She's been targeted by the state party Democrats, who a lot of them are leftist insurgents pretending to be progressives. And they are generally, when I've been to a state party function, a lot of white women, and they've been trashing Janelle nonstop. She's kept her composure. She's kept her head up. She has the most qualifications. She's one of our top state legislators. Representative in the state house. And she's been doing her best to run a clean campaign. She's got the best endorsements, the strongest endorsements, local newspapers, top legislators in the state, as well as our last 2 or 3 governors as well. So she's got a lot of support, but she's got a lot against her with what they call grassroots, which is just the precinct committee people in her district that are supporting for, Jamie instead, who's got a really bad track record, not as much experience, and she's got a lot of accusations of mistreating people on her campaign as well as in her work life. So just thought I'd share that. If you can amplify her, that's great. I'm also amplifying all of my friends here's candidates as well, because I know we've got the primary in Maryland tomorrow, and so I've got my list and I'm sharing everybody that you're promoting that I can. So just wanted to share that, as well as we've had a lot of controversy in Oregon about APAC money going to PACs that support a lot of the candidates that are not on the leftist insurgents. So we have Pramila Jayapal's sister, Shushila Jayapal, is running for District 3, which is going to be a blue seat. But my concern from the beginning was that she was going to be a new squad member that doesn't vote with Democrats. Just like some of the other ones voted against infrastructure, and just uses their office to fundraise and performative politics instead of actually helping move progress forward. I like to say progressive is as progressive does, and they don't do progressive things. So she's not as qualified as Maxine Dexter, who's a doctor. She's considered one of the top legislators in the state as well. And she has a focus on healthcare and the environment. She is very progressive. But she's been, trashed nonstop the past few weeks by Shushila and another candidate, Eddie Morales. And so it's been a bit rough. They're all starting to get their own money from out of state, so they've backed off of that now. But we're just hoping that sanity prevails, and the real effective Democrats, the best leaders that we can possibly have, make primary. That we have their leadership. So that's all I got.
T-Bug, I've been seeing the controversy that you've been saying, and you're exactly right. They have been definitely trying to smear her and trash her. So I do try to amplify your tweets and as often as I can, because I do think that she is definitely running a campaign of dignity and integrity, because she does not punch below the belt. She just tries to get up there and state her state her case and promote her platform and discuss the policies. And she's business. She is about the business of, serving the people. And I do hope that she wins as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also say thank you to everyone who's been amplifying her. I really appreciate all of you.
Well, thank you for helping us get to know her better. And should she want to come and speak to us here, we would not be opposed. But she's running with the likes of soon to be Speaker Jeffries. I doubt she needs Advocacy Arena, but we're here and we would love to have her. So, you have any sway in that area
I
with
I
that?
have asked. I have asked, but yeah, it's
Yeah. And my feelings aren't hurt,
yeah.
We're babies in this thing, so and we just are trying to do good and are still learning. And I want candidates to get the best amplification that they can and recognize that there are platforms far bigger and more renowned than mine that can give them that. But I am always happy to help amplify good candidates and good campaigns. So, thank you for bringing her into our radar. And with that, folks, I am going to pass it to my fabulous co host, and we're going to start to wrap it up. And maybe we'll just do a little bit of continuation on Monday. And I'll have some of this posted on my timeline because I too am losing my voice. This drainage, sinus stuff. It's not fun, but I love spring. So, sister, my dear.
Hi. Yes, it has been a great conversation today. You've had a lot of speakers up here, and I love what we've been able to talk about and share with one another, even in our grief, even in our frustration. And I say that to say this. Last week, just before we came into the space, I started seeing on my timeline these attacks against Miss Denise Oliver Velez. So I was extremely frustrated and angry when I came into the space last week. I couldn't respond then because I knew that I was angry, and I take very good advice from my mentor Miss D, and just trying to calm myself down. So when I sent that tweet saying today might be my last day, it wasn't because I was making a choice that I was thinking of or considering leaving Twitter. That's not what it was. It was not this emotional pull that I was trying to, or reaction that I was trying to get from people. It was really me just trying to say, calm the F down, Gwen, because you are, if you say anything right now, you will definitely be banned from Twitter. And it wasn't just that, oh my God, I'm so angry that Miss Denise was attacked. I had watched for weeks my bestie LMZ get attacked, then Miss D get attacked. And I mean it ridiculousness. It was the stupidity of people. And when I say that, I'm not saying that they're stupid as in they're unintelligent. I'm saying the attacking of them was just unnecessary and ridiculous. There are definitely ways that we can have discourse. And there are definitely ways that we can even have discourse on a platform like this, which often encourages nonsense. But that is not often how people choose to express themselves here. It's always an attack. At least that's what I think, or that's what I've seen. If they see a reasonable, sensible, strong Democrat, it's, let's just go on the attack and disparage them in some type of way. And I think I just had it by that point. And so I really wasn't trying to play games with people. And I just really want that to be out there so that people understand where my emotions were coming from, where that tweet came from, just so there's a clear understanding and transparency there. And the idea that you have to come onto somebody else's timeline and attack them or make some kind of if they're not a public figure, it just doesn't make sense to me. I know it's a public forum and that that's kind of how this game works on here. I just don't see how people or the necessity of people other than to amplify themselves. That's what I think. I think that a lot of times people are doing it to promote themselves and lift themselves up to a higher visibility versus really trying to stand on the principles of what they claim they believe in. Because oftentimes I don't see it. You get into, if you take the moment and opportunity to try and have a back and forth with some of them. Most of the time, everything falls apart because it's not even glued together with a glue stick. It's not even taped together with Scotch tape. It's literally like, spit or something, trying to just, crush it. I think this goes together. It's those people who are creating. A lot of a lot of the frustration for me on this app. There are many times that I see things that I don't agree with, and I address it in a different way. And I'm not saying everybody has to do it like me. I'm just saying this is how I choose to do it, and so I find it really offensive when I see it being done in an attack type of way. At this point in time, I am not patient enough to play games in regards to my democracy, and I call it mine because I do claim ownership over it. I call it mine because we should all feel some type of ownership over it. And I think that if people actually took it in such a way where they personalized it as their democracy, then perhaps people willing to march in the streets and set up encampments and create theater around something as important as our democracy. I am tired of listening to the nonsense, and I'm not gonna. There's plenty I could keep going on, but I'm not. I'm going to mention someone by the name of Stephen Dane. He is considered to be a favorite to replace McConnell as the Senate Majority Leader. And he currently is the GOP chair for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. So while he can't officially come out and, actually campaign for that chair because of his current position, for that position, because of his current position as being the chair of the committee, he's doing everything else in his power. He has written an amicus brief in favor of the former president in his vision of his imperialistic rule. And it's really important that people understand that it's not going to be people that we think are the normal. Everybody's looking and watching the dramatics of Lauren Boebert and MTG and all of these people that they see speaking on TV. And what they don't realize is there are so many others that are quietly working behind the scenes to help the former president in his vision of basically deconstructing the democracy in this country. And so when I find names, and there is an article and I will put it up in the nest because I don't think I have yet. When I find names, and I think that it's important to share them so that when you hear it, you recognize it, or at least you somewhat remember that this person is not a friend of the people. They are really an enemy of the people. So that leads me to talk about the voter fraud that took place during the last election. I'm going to bring up two names. Stephanie Scott, she's the former Adams Township county clerk here in Michigan. Her and her lawyer, Stephanie Lambert, allowed an unauthorized computer examiner to access voter data, which included public voter info for the 2020 general election. So Scott, who is 52, has been charged with 5 felonies and a misdemeanor, and Lambert, who is 42, faces 3 felonies, including using a computer to commit a crime. So the Michigan State Police seized the voting tabulator from Stephanie Scott because she refused to give it up. She refused to hand it over because she wasn't finished playing with her little new toy. And, they had a search warrant and they were able to seize them. This is where we are. Both of them are election deniers. Lambert even sued to overturn Biden's Michigan win in 2020. And Scott was barred from running for the township's local election after the Michigan Bureau of Elections found that Scott had failed to take precautions to ensure voting security. She has been voted out of office last year in a recall election. And let me tell you who was behind it, who was behind this campaign to oust her. And this is what we mean when we say sometimes coalitions have strange bedfellows. 4 conservative Republican women turned her in and then, started this campaign to oust her from office. And I'm very grateful for them. And this is probably I don't know these women, would probably never even consider that they were in some way an ally of democracy, but very grateful that they take democracy seriously. So while we may not agree on many things, on that principle, I think that we do have some type of understanding here. So, when I say that they gave information or they shared information, I mean like home addresses, confidential emails, and other sensitive information that is captured in the Dominion voting systems when you're casting your vote. You just don't realize how much information they have, because why would we know that, or why would we be aware of that? I don't think we've ever even thought of it too deeply, other than to know that when you're casting your vote, it does become some type of public record. You are 9 times out of 10 gonna get be called for jury duty. There is information there that we know that goes along with you casting that vote, but you don't think too much on it until 2020 happened. And so it's an issue. And not that I live in Adams County or anywhere near it, although it's not far from here. I guess it's near Grosse Pointe area, which would be about 45 minutes from me. It's just the fact that all of those people who cast a vote, all of those people, we have no idea where that information is or how it's being used. We know that there are plenty of organizations who have been funded by dark money and promoted by MAGA to set out to intimidate voters at the voting booth and during this election process. And who knows how they will use that information. So it's important that we're all very vigilant in defending our democracy at every step of the way. So I don't think that you're going to change a MAGA's mind. I think you're going to change a fence rider's mind. Or I think you might find that there are some Republican voters who might not be voting for the former president or for anyone that stands for his agenda of basically disseminating our democracy here in this country. And that is why a conversation might be necessary. Ask questions and then move on. And in Colorado, I wanted to point out that the state legislators have passed several bills to protect the state's elections and voters ahead of this 2024 elections that are coming up. And I need to post that article too. I'm so sorry, folks. I thought that I had that one up there and I don't. So, one of the bills that has already been passed and signed by the governor is a voting in jail bill. It's a senatorial bill, SB 24-72. It's a bill that requires the county sheriff to designate someone that informs confined individuals. So I'm assuming these are people who are being detained prior to trial. If they're eligible to vote, that they have the right to vote and then coordinate setting up a temporary in-person voting center for those who are eligible and have that right. And it's the first of its kind in the nation. So Colorado, hats off to them. There are a few other bills that are just waiting for a governor's signature. And like I said, I'll put those up in the nest. Other than that, I just really wanted to make sure that I gave you that information before we left here today. And I will turn it back over to you, Misty. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. I am glad that you did give us that update on the fake electors, and those are just the ones in Michigan.
Yes. Yes, because what I did learn was that I think there's 7 states, and each state is like handling it differently. So Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada, every fake elector is face felony charge, except for I think one person in Michigan who negotiated some kind of cooperative deal. But in New Mexico, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, no one's facing any charges. And in Georgia, the 3 fake electors have been charged, alongside the former president. And some have struck community deals. But Kenneth Cheeseborough, the Wisconsin lawyer, he's the one who coordinated all of this across these 7 states. And all he got was a slap on the wrist. He didn't really get much. And hasn't been charged in any other state besides Georgia. So that's pretty interesting as well.
Absolutely. And I do think it's important. There's so many news stories, cases for us to keep up with. We kind of have to keep our head on a swivel and join informative conversations like this to try to get mega doses of information. And we're here just once a week, and news is happening every day, 24/7. We can't cover it all, but sometimes I like for us to dig into stories that may not be percolating or add some depth to the stories that just get reported on and buried by the next news story, because I do think that it's important to not memory hole some of these major events as mainstream media tends to do, those that do journalism and care about it. And then you have those like the guy at the New York Times who doesn't really think that much about his job, or the purpose of him being in the Constitution at all. He doesn't feel it is his duty to help preserve democracy because, how dare he become, an arm
And
of the Biden campaign? It is just that is the
that right there
stuff.
should disqualify him as being the editor of that damn
Yeah,
newspaper.
I mean, that right there angers me to like no end. And the stuff that I see going on with these techno monarchs, the tech bros, the Silicon Valley bros, because they actually, to me, represent that same kind of shadowy network that the Council for National Policy does. They just do it in a digital realm, like Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and these guys, and they all kind of know one another, and they all have these super egos, and none of them really do seem to care about democracy. It's about their app or their company or their coins, whatever it is. It is that extreme aspect of libertarianism, which is just, just a different kind of vein of white Christian nationalism, because that is absolutely at the core of their beliefs. And understand the authors of Project 2025 are from the Heritage Foundation. And that group of people that founded that, the same guy, Paul Weyrich, also founded ALEC, and they came out of this Christian movement, and this has always been their goal. They've been very patient, very persistent about it, and we have to understand that their goal is power, and they are fusing Christianity and other cultural war types of things to rile up those that they can, and basically capture through religion a whole lot of others, because they can, when people are that connected to their faith, to their sense of being, because for some people, that is everything, that is life, and they know that. And, Hitler did the same thing. I am going to be posting some articles, some that we didn't get to in conversation, but I hope you guys saw my agenda. And these are just things, again, that I think it's very important for us to keep an eye on. And one of them that, if I haven't posted it, I will be. And this one is from a person that has a Master of Divinity, and she is somewhat kind of she has an inside perspective on this Christian nationalism. And she wrote an article that's called Christian Nationalism, a Grave Threat to America. And I just want to read a little bit of this paragraph because that was scary for me. She says that she studied a course in the pursuit of her master's that was titled Christianity and the Holocaust. And in that course, she learned that Hitler's strategy was to build loyalty and support within German churches. It was masterful. He encouraged kids in his German youth organizations. Remember how I told you that Charlie Kirk has had like a decade and a couple of years to mine the fields of the youth, college and high school. And so he encouraged these kids in the German youth organizations to get their families to attend Sunday worship with them. And the church attendance skyrocketed. Pastors were thrilled. Eventually, Germany's government, rule, and religion became one. And that's what they're trying to do here. It goes back to what I say, they are coming at us from so many different angles and directions, attacking the education, attacking our church, our houses of faith. And it's in a relentless manner, because now they literally do have, it's not just kind of spur of the moment emotional. They are working with plans and groups. And so it's important that we're aware of that. And we're going to keep talking about these groups. So I'll kind of continue with this, because all of it ties in to where I started the conversation, and that is the lost cause. And right now, they are in the last waves of their lost cause, because they know that they, again, as I said before, are literally going to be outnumbered. And their whole thing is about creating a system of control and power, even from a minority position. So I just want to thank all of you guys for joining us and participating in a wonderful conversation today, and ask that you share it for those who may not have been able to attend. And you can look for it on the podcast on Spotify or YouTube. And if you have not subscribed to Advocacy Arena's YouTube channel, please do so. I try to make sure that Our live conversations are added in the playlist there, but I also try to put a few new things, and I will be adding some things, but I don't want to keep you any longer. I just want to thank you for being so generous with your time, and those of you who shared your thoughts and information, and let you know that even if you weren't just being here, I see you. I appreciate you. We love that you are a part of this community. I'm so thankful and grateful to my fabulous co host. Couldn't do this without her. And I am grateful. And I also want to just say I hope all of you who were celebrating Mother's Day yesterday in any kind of way, as a mother or as a daughter, or, maybe both, that you had wonderful time with your loved ones, and that you don't forget it and you don't wait to another Mother's Day, that you continue to make those connections and let the people that you love know that you love them today. With that, I am going to leave you with these encouraging words. I know I started out
Oh, Miss D,
with,
can I add one little thing?
sure, yeah.
Okay, I just want to add that there is a documentary called Bad Faith. I put it up in the nest, and I put it also in the purple pill, and it ties right into everything that you've been talking about in regards to Christian nationalism, because that's what it's about. So it's streaming on several different platforms, and I just want to make people aware to please check it out.
Well, thank you. And that's another resource. Oh, yes. And I want to remind people that today I did put in the thread the resource of the spreadsheet that I created for the gift articles. You are able to, you can check it out and read those articles. That link is shared in my timeline. And I also added a tab to provide just some good, I think, civic citizen links for citizen information. So do check that out. Share with anyone that you think may find it useful. And again, leave you with these encouraging words. From the late great Representative John Lewis. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. So never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. So thank you again for your continuing participation and support here in Advocacy Arena each week. And I want to wish you all a great week of good troublemaking ahead, and invite you to join us again next week here in Advocacy Arena at the same time. So, with that, I'm going to leave you all with peace and blessings.